This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
How's it going, everybody? This is Keith.
And Katie, hosts of Coffee with Keith and Katie, here on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. When you're done here, I hope you'll check out our show, Coffee with Keith and Katie,
where we talk about our lives and relationship over a cup of coffee.
A new episode airs on Facebook Live every Monday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie.
Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Thank you for tuning in to a special news segment before your regular scheduled programming. Today, Facebook founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg found himself in the crosshairs of the Senate on Coruscant's Capitol Hill. Yes, Palpatine himself has taken the reins in this hearing in what is sure to have major repercussions for years to come. We join the hearing live now.
Yes, Mr. Zuckerberg, it is good to see you again here on Capitol Hill in Coruscant. My question for you right now is, are you intending Facebook to continue as a free service for its users?
Yes, Mr. Senate. The goal of Facebook has always been to connect people through all walks of life in order to allow them to continue developing those relationships. The answer is yes. There will always be a free version of Facebook.
Yes. Now, I mean, I can tax citizens and extort money through mind control and manipulation, but you're essentially a robot, correct? I mean, if so, how do you sustain a business model where users don't pay for your service?
Mr. Senate, we run ads.
Yes, I see. Good. Yes, how delightfully evil. I may have use for you yet, Count Zuckerberg.
And with that, we return you to your regular scheduled programming.
I have you now.
Welcome to another epic edition of Podcast, a Star Wars story. I am Ezekiel Drews, and with me, as always,
is Danny Domer.
With us today, we have the hottest hired hand from Hoth. That's right, the bounty hunter who takes no for an answer. The man with the slowest blaster, the bountyless mountie, Jameson McNeill. Jameson, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Good. We're glad to hear that and have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. What we'd like you to do to kick us off is if you could give us an introduction to how you were brought into the Star Wars fandom, and then where you lie in the spectrum of light and dark, and then our show's Star Wars fun fact before we jump into today's topic. Take it away.
Sure. So I think as far back as I can remember, I would think that my first experience with Star Wars was when my dad took me and my brother to go see New Hope in theaters. And then from there, my parents kind of bolstered my interest in Star Wars we had like all of the toys. We had, like 5 different Lukes, 2 different Hans, 3 different Leias. We had a Jabba the Hutt. We had a 2-scale AT-AT walker. So we had all the fun toys, and kind of just as the years, it's just grown from there. So
nice. Would you say that you were indoctrinated?
In hindsight, it does kind of seem like that, I suppose.
See, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with indoctrination of Star Wars.
I mean, I didn't feel indoctrinated, so I think there's something to be said about that.
Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Give us where you are in the scale and the spectrum of light and dark.
Well, I not particularly tied down to good or bad. As some might know, I like to play the rogue in my D&D sessions, so I suppose I like to identify as the scum or bounty hunter, as it was mentioned.
Scum and villainy.
Scum and villainy, yes. So I do what I want.
Okay, so I would say that in terms of for moral compass, I would say that puts him in the gray area.
Yeah, it's a nice shade of gray. Yeah.
Well, that puts you kind of. I'm dark. Danny's light. So that puts you right in the middle of us, and Danny's kind of like light to dark. I'm sorry, light to gray. So that fits in well with.
Okay.
Freudian slip there.
Yeah. Great. And then for our show's Star Wars Fun Fan Fact, what have you got for us today?
Yeah, so my passion in Star Wars has always been the vehicle, the spaceships, specifically the fighters, and my favorite character is Darth Vader. And I hit with his specific ship, it's the TIE Advanced. It was something that Vader commissioned shortly after becoming Darth Vader, but it was too expensive for mass production. So it was created in small quantities to be used by other elite Imperial pilots, but it was mostly important to the Empire because it spawned the TIE Interceptor, which is kind of it's the TIE fighter, but instead of the flat panel wings, it has two sort of blades that face out to the front, if you're not really familiar with it. And that was one that really was for the Top Gun pilots, the ones that had the most maneuverability because it had no defenses and no hull. And that, in turn, inspired the A-Wing on the Rebel side, because the A-Wing was actually created and succeeded in being able to go faster than the TIE Interceptor. So, neat little chain of events there.
Wow. So you said Top Gun. So are you Maverick? Are you Iceman? Or are you Goose?
I understand all of those words individually.
Spoken like a true Star Wars fan. Well, perfect. Well, that ties actually directly in because we are going to be actually be talking about the Star Wars ships, specifically about some of the fighters here. And I'm glad that you brought up about the Darth Vader vehicle, because I think that when people think of Star Wars and they think of the ships, I think there's probably two main actual. At least in my mind, there are two main spaceships that come to mind. And that was the first one was the Darth Vader TIE Advanced Fighter. And then the other one, to me, is just because it's so closely associated with Luke Skywalker, is the X-Wing. So I know that there are a couple different spaceships that we probably want to cover that maybe aren't as heavily featured on the Rebel side. But I know that there are, obviously there's the X-Wing, there's the Y-Wing, the B-Wing, the A-Wing that you just mentioned. So why don't you just kind of kick it off for us a little bit about kind of like what are your favorite vehicles and why?
My favorite on the Rebel side would be the Y-Wing. It's really sturdy. It's kind of like a tank. It's the tank that the Rebels have. Primarily used for bombers, for bombing, but it has a lot of other capabilities too, like torpedoes. It has a turret which allows for 360 firing, and it's just a really sturdy fighter. It kind of got outclassed as time went on. There were other modifications, and so you might not see them as much in more recent instances. But it's to me, it's a solid fighter, and I like it.
Okay. If my understanding was correct about the Y-Wing, I think that because it was a bomber, the speed was probably a bit slower, right?
Right.
So because it was designed for heavy payload.
Yeah, it was pretty tanky. I believe it was featured in Rogue One. They did some bomb runs there with the Y-Wing. It's not meant for speed, and that's kind of why it got outclassed by other things.
Well, also keep in mind, when we talk about the Y-Wing, it was introduced during the Clone Wars as a premier bomber at that time.
Yeah, so, it was really early, and if you look at the Y-Wing, it actually has kind of a grisly design to it near the body of it, right below the cockpit. Mm-hmm. That whole part is pretty gnarly looking. It's not like it has any plating or anything. It's just kind of exposed, I suppose. And then even the thrusters on it too are just like these big two tubes that are hanging off the edge of it. So it is pretty rough looking as compared to like an A-Wing or an X-Wing.
Mm-hmm. Well, during the Clone Wars, they had tight production because they needed to churn out the ships as quickly as possible during the war.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the Y-Wing. I think it's a really versatile craft. The turret and the bomber capabilities, and among other things, it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, why don't we jump to the one that's probably not as known? I'm interested to know more about the B-Wing. Tell me about the B-Wing.
So the B-Wing is kind of it's kind of along the similar lines of the Y-Wing as far as maneuverability. It did have it. So if you're not familiar with the shape of it, it's kind of shaped like it's really linear in its flight mode, and it has the cockpit way off to the one side of like this big wing. But then when it goes into battle mode, it actually folds out so it looks more like a cross, and the cockpit sits at the top of it, and then it has two wings out to the side, and then the gun is located at the very bottom fin. So again, like I said, it starts out like this, just like a wing, just like a wing with a cockpit on the end of it, and then it stretches out into like a cross pattern. Pretty good offensive capabilities, not super maneuverable, but I know you see a couple glimpses of it in the 4 through 6 movies.
Yeah, it's featured prominently in The Return of the Jedi as like one of their main fighters. It was actually, like, if you follow the Star Wars Rebels, it was introduced during the immediate years before the first Death Star was destroyed. And it had a couple of different armaments attached at that time. It was kind of weird. It was almost like a mini Death Star. I don't know if you know too much more about that.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, the guns kind of coalesced together like the Death Star does, and then it shot a single beam out, and it would destroy things. And I didn't do too much research on it, but it just seemed a little strange to have mini Death Stars flying around destroying X-Wings or destroying TIE fighters.
I can't imagine that'd be too practical in the heat of battle. Yeah.
Yeah, hang on. I'm just going to let me angle and then charge up for about 15 minutes. And you guys go and you shoot those other ones down, so that way I can take out the big one. Oh, they just took out my guys. Hey, can you be my stand-in here? I'm still charging up. It's got 14 minutes and 30 seconds left. You're dead too. Dang, this is so impractical. Why is it like this? Yeah, I would say that might be one of the reasons why we probably don't see it that much. So
I do find it interesting that the same concept is featured in The Last Jedi, where they have bombers, but they have the same B-Wing design. They're just heavy payload attached to them.
So they're similar design. So that's the bombers in the beginning of Last Jedi. They're similar design. I was wondering because like what you were describing seemed almost exactly like what those bombers were.
I don't know too much about those bombers, but they are significantly bigger than a B-Wing. A B-Wing can maybe fit 2 people, which, well, okay, I suppose the bombers were bigger, but they still didn't have that many cockpit space. But those bombers were a little bigger because they had, you could see they had a significant more bunch
payload.
of payload.
That was ton of bombs that they were available.
But that is kind of like what the shape is when a B-wing unfolds. To be honest, I'm actually not sure why they call it a B-wing. A lot of the other ships actually look like the shape that their name suggests, but not the B-wing. Do you know, Danny?
Well, the oval, the cockpit oval is the B, and then the wing is the stick to that oval. So it's like a loose version of what a B looks like, but it's there. It's there. It's just very, very loose.
It's just use your imagination.
Maybe it was the B-wing because instead of what you're talking about, maybe it's because they wanted to be like, "What's up, baby?" I don't know.
Well, they couldn't have a cross wing because they had an X-wing. So they had to come up with some sort of different name attached to it.
Gotcha.
I just think that if you're going to name a Rebel fighter, it has to somehow match the shape of what it is that you're represented. That's all I'm going to say. K-wing looks like a K-wing.
Breaking news on Capitol Hill. The Senate and Facebook have broken into all-out social media war. In an effort to combat quote-unquote dank memes, Facebook has been flagging and deleting the pages of hundreds of Palpatine supporters after reposting the phrase, quote-unquote, "make the Republic great again," which he used on the Senate floor. To everyone's surprise, including this veteran reporter, Zuckerberg pulled out 6 lightsabers from within his robotic frame and killed all of Palpatine's guards. He then unmasked himself as General Grievous and kidnapped the Senate. The Chancellor. In this reporter's opinion, this explains why Facebook's capture verification system has never stopped a bot. We are being told that the Jedi are in hot pursuit of Zucker Grievous and... Wait! What's that? I'm being told that Anakin Skywalker has told Mark Zucker Grievous that he is quote-unquote shorter than he expected. Stay tuned for more breaking news after this podcast has finished.
And that's when the Ewoks made me their chief. And that's all there is to it, guys. That's...
Oh,
I was a natural-born leader for it.
It's such a heartwarming story.
Yeah.
That's a little strange. I'm not sure if I buy that.
As I cradled that Ewok's body in my arm, I cried out to the heavens. Well, hang on. I'm getting a notification that my entire story was cut out. We apparently went to some breaking news story about the Senate. First of all, I don't know how we have breaking news on a podcast. So that's awkward. And other than that, I'm not sure why there would be breaking news about Star Wars. But I guess either way, let's get back on track here, guys. Let's talk about the A-Wing.
So like I said, the A-Wing was made as a counter to the TIE Interceptor, and its primary function was just speed. Just going as fast as you possibly can. It was really good for hit and runs with it. Just like I said, it's just a speed machine. It's a tiny craft. It's only able to seat one person. And these were like the aces of the Rebels. They are the ones that flew A-Wings.
If I remember correctly, the A-Wing was the one that was obviously shaped like an A, but it was like a red and whitish craft. Am I correct? Is that the one? Am I right? Is this the one that Obi-Wan was using in Attack of the Clones? Did he have an A-Wing, or was it a separate ship?
No. Yeah, that's a Jedi starfighter.
Okay.
A-Wings were developed much later.
Gotcha. During the Rebel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is there anyone of note that we should remember from the films using an A-Wing?
I don't remember anybody. Do you, Danny? I know there's like people that are non-canon that are like heroes that use the A-Wing, but none that were actually in the movie.
Yeah, because I would say probably, especially because of the biggest focus on Luke having the X-Wing, that the X-Wing was so heavily featured in the movies that I personally just don't remember seeing the A-Wings being very featured in the films, but I do remember playing different Star Wars video games with ships where the A-Wing was part of the available crafts. And like you said, they were faster and stuff. They didn't do a ton of payload damage, though.
Right. They basically, when they were doing initial tests with the A-Wing, they actually like gave it some loadouts like torpedoes and I don't know if there were bombs on it, but like I said, there were torpedoes. And then they're actually like, get that stuff out of here, make it even faster. And so like it really has the laser cannons, but that's it.
Yeah. Well, let's rest in peace the rebel pilot that flew right into the bridge of the Executor and destroy the Death Star, at least initially on impact. That might be the most famous A-Wing pilot of the original trilogy, but there were some...
I believe some would refer to that as a kamikaze.
Yeah. Well, he came... No, can't say that. He was just earlier in the space battle. I thought he was like flying right out of the Death Star. There was an expanded universe character that was very popular, best friends with Wedge and Tilly's, that flew an A-Wing in the second Death Star run, but I couldn't give you his name. I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, since it's no longer super notable, let's skip talking anymore about the A-Wing. A-Wing had its day. Nobody remembers the A-Wing.
You don't see it in the more recent movies, so I guess we're done with that now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the X-Wing then. Just to wrap up the Rebels. So everybody knows the X-Wing. It starts off looking kind of more like a T, but then it's like, hey, surprise, X. Obviously Luke had one in A New Hope. We saw it in The Empire Strikes Back. We saw it in Return of the Jedi. We saw it we did see it in The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens.
Yep.
Not super heavily featured in The Force Awakens, but for sure we saw Luke's X-Wing underneath the water, having suffered 30 years of rust damage.
Yeah.
So I guess so what's outside of those most obvious references, what would be probably the most beneficial use for the X-Wing?
Well, the X-Wing was just it was a really great balance of speed and power. It was more powerful than an A-Wing, obviously not as not as fast as an A-Wing, but it was the perfect balance of strength, and it had bomb loadouts, it has torpedoes. So it's a really versatile, really well-balanced ship, which is why you see in the more recent movies, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, it's pretty much the only thing they use. Mm-hmm. That is, and Luke used the T-65, the one in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. That's actually a T-70, so it's an even more improved model of the X-Wing.
I would certainly hope after 30 years, difference, that they'd have a better model. Imagine driving around a 77, Cadillac, and then 30 years later, it's, hey, you guys see my 77 Cadillac? It's really great. We should keep using these. I'm pretty sure that would be the most worthless piece of junk, which explains why.
You obviously don't hang around car people enough.
Well, I am a Star Wars nerd, so that's...
Well, the T-65 is a classic, but that's not what you want to drive into battle. No. When you have the option of a T-70, I suppose.
What's also interesting to note is it's originated from the ARC-170 starfighter that the clone troopers used during the Clone Wars. And the Empire didn't think it was worthwhile craft because they needed something with speed and not something that was heavy. He also could fit a bunch of TIE fighters on a Star Destroyer, whereas an ARC 170 starfighter took up a lot of space. The X-Wing, very versatile, and could also be retrofitted for reconnaissance as well.
That's interesting to know. So, well, you brought up the TIE fighters, so I think we kind of finished with the Rebels. Let's jump over to the Imperial fleet. And so we talked a bit before about Vader's version of the TIE fighter. So let's actually talk about the regular TIE fighter, because I think that's probably the other well-known ship that a lot of people associate, especially with anybody who jumps into A New Hope and sees that famous scene where Luke is making the Death Star run. We see him getting chased by, obviously, Vader's TIE Advanced, but we also see him being flanked by two regular TIE fighters.
Yeah, the TIE fighters that you see in most of the movies are pretty much the Empire's bread and butter. They're really easy to make. They're super maneuverable, but they are sorely lacking in defenses. They're really easy to make, and they're really easy to break. They're good for fighters for the purposes that the Empire used them for, which is just sending them out in these huge swaths. And that, worked well for their strategy. You don't really need it was a quantity versus quality thing. That's why when Vader came along, he wanted something a little nicer than just what your standard TIE fighter could offer. His has been modified to have more defenses. It is more difficult to maneuver than a standard TIE fighter. So it was made in the advanced TIE fighter was made in limited quantities, and other elite pilots were also given the privilege to be able to pilot it. But it was not made readily available for the Empire to use.
About how much was the cost for creating Vader's TIE Advanced? Any idea?
That I'm not sure. I can't think of the real numbers, but I just know it was too expensive for them to manufacture for everybody to be able to use one.
So would you equate, though, with the quality of Vader's craft, obviously because he's the supreme commander of the fleet, it was worth it for him to have, let's say, the Mercedes-Benz of the fleet, and then everyone else was basically like the Walmart brand.
Yeah,
so they made him as efficient as possible for as cheap as possible. So
yeah, the TIE fighters were for your basic fighter pilot. So
the bantha fodder, basically.
Yeah,
hey, go out there and get killed.
You have more prominent pilots. They were typically granted something a little more robust. There's it's not canon, but the famous Imperial pilot Sunter Fell.
Not canon. No, I'm just kidding.
It's out there. And I choose to believe it. But Sunter Fell, he was a famous Imperial pilot, and once he had proven himself, he was given the TIE Interceptor then, which, as I mentioned before, was for the aces. Those are for the people that knew how to pilot it, because a TIE Interceptor had even maybe not worse than a standard TIE fighter, but about the same. And it can't take very much damage at all. So if you piloted a TIE Interceptor, you were a real ace, because you would be avoiding enemy fire instead of, having enough shields to take it.
I completely agree about the TIE fighter. And with Baron Sunter Fell, because he was a Baron.
Yes.
Kids, go read your books. But definitely, you see a little bit of a progression from the A New Hope to The Force Awakens, as the TIE fighter has rear firing capabilities and has 2 people in the cockpit instead of 1, which I found interesting.
That was the Special Forces TIE Fighter.
Okay.
That was, you can see it has a red stripe on the cockpit or over the cockpit. The First Order, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The First Order, when they were born, they basically just took the Empire's basic TIE Fighter and made a little more modifications just to make it just that much better. And that one there with the rear firing cannon, that was for the special. They refer to it as the Special Forces, and it was like their crack team of fighters for what the First Order had to offer.
Wow. Well, I don't know about you, Danny, but I definitely picked up a lot of new information today. I think this has been, especially with just talking about just the fighters and seeing what, just some additional information, especially because this isn't something that a lot of people just get information-wise just from watching the films. Like, this isn't something that you could just glean and be like, oh yeah, this is cool, I know this now.
Yeah, this is my passion. I love the fighters and the ships in Star Wars.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that the information with us today. For everyone that's listening today, find Podcast A Star Wars Story on Facebook, or you can send us an email at starwarspodcast18@gmail.com to share your thoughts on what your favorite fighter or spaceship is, or if you have a topic that you'd like us to talk about. We always appreciate suggestions. You can subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media on iTunes, Spreaker, and wherever epic podcasts are found. We do like feedback. We haven't gotten a whole lot of feedback, so we'd like to hear more from you guys on if you like this episode, or even if you didn't for some weird reason, please give us a rating and a review so that way we can keep making great episodes for you. I am Ezekiel.
And I'm Danny.
And thanks to Jameson for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And again, thank you to all our listeners for spending another epic Star Wars story with us. Now, Jameson, I think you said you hadn't listened to too many podcasts, so I just want to let you know I'll give you a head start.
What do you mean? Head start to what?
Really?
Oh no.
Really?
Oh God. You get away from me. I'm going to head to my Y-Wing.
What? Shoot, where'd I leave my... Wait, where's my keys?
He almost at my Y-Wing.
I'm going to get you.
I'm climbing in.
I got him. I got your keys.
Danny, give it back. Nope. Hey.
And warp speed. Oh.
Got him.
Warp speed.
He doesn't know he can't take off yet.
I can't take off yet.
All right, let me get in my ship here. Where's the on button? Oh wait, here we go.
Red button.
This'll do it. Oh wait, here's one.
Here we go. All right. Oh man, really? Come on.
Sorry.
Did you enable the twin ion engine?
No. Hang on.
Sir,
does anybody have the number for AAA?
This is IT, sir. Did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Is it plugged in?
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Hang on. And there we go. Okay.
All right. Cool.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Head start. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thanks.
I have you now.
It's no good. I can't maneuver.
Stay on target.
I'm too close.
Stay on target.
I need to loosen up.
Got you. Next time I hopefully won't have this problem with my engine not wanting to start up. All right, Danny, I'm coming back.
No, you can stay. No, stay up there. I don't want you back down here.
Fine, I'll see you next time, Danny. May the Force be with you.
And also, maybe with you.